Hmm. Fear. Who no fear women? Oh. Sometimes betrayal teaches the best lessons in life, and the person meant to finish someone pata often eats from the same cooking pot. This isn't just another cliche Nollywood script, no. It's a real life story about how a stepsister tried to destroy a bright future with hate and pure envy. But as they say, God passed them. To understand this shocking story, the journey has to start from the very beginning, back to the struggling life of a family in Ibadan. You know that kind of family where everyone is just managing, where there was no chicken unless it's Christmas and all the kids go to public school. Well, that was Batif's house. Her father, Baba Batif, was a long distance downfall driver. And let's be frank, the man was hardly ever home. Sometimes we would see him twice in a whole month. See, and honestly, nobody was crying. As long as he brought home a little money for soup and school fees, everyone was okay. But that little money, it never reached Batif. Batif's mother was late. She died giving birth to her. From a very young age, she was used to playing by herself and reading her books quietly, since she didn't have a father that cared much for her upbringing considering his busy job as a driver. Batif was a perfect little girl that didn't bother anyone. When she wasn't in school, you could tell she was home reading her books or waiting for her father, who some night never returned. When Batif was just 6 years old, her father decided he wasn't cut out for the single father life. Between doing all the house chores for his little girl and trying to manage his equally demanding job, he took a bold step. Baba Batife was getting married to a new wife. Batife didn't know how to feel, but some part of her was relieved that she wouldn't be staying in their small home all by herself anymore. Her new stepmother even had a little girl about her age, and Batife was looking forward to having a playmate at home. Now that there was a woman in the picture, Baba Batif stayed away even more. So her stepmother, Mama Onyi, was the one running the show. And let me tell you, that woman had wicked stepmother in her DNA. She had her own daughter, Onyinyechi Onyi, and she treated her like a small goddess. At first, she tried to extend that treatment to Batif, but it didn't last more than a few weeks. In fact, this was what Batif called the honeymoon period. Soon after their wedding, Mama Onyi completely changed. And all the nice little things she did for Batif totally ended. Braiding her hair, cooking for her, buying her pretty little clothes, all of that ended. Now, there was a version of Mama Onyi that Batif had never imagined. She'd been hearing of wicked stepmothers, and frankly, she thought it would never happen to her. But sooner rather than later, fate had other plans, because that far fetched tale of wickedness was coming even closer to Batif than she could ever imagine. Now, while Onyi was inside the house sleeping or painting her nails, Batif was in the farm with her stepmother. From morning till night, Batif would be hoeing, planting, and carrying heavy loads. When they got home, Batif would still be the one to sweep the compound, wash the pots, and cook the food. Mama Onye would just sit there. I'm monitoring her like a CCTV camera. If Batif even rested for 5 minutes, the woman would start shouting. Batif wasn't a lazy girl. Far from that. After growing up alone with her father, she picked up a few things and knew how to keep the house neat and clean up after herself. But now that it was a full family, Batif knew that it was a different level of servitude. She was doing everything by herself. Oni was the slay queen of the family, even when they were in deep poverty. Batif can't precisely tell where the money came from, but Oni always had the flashiest clothes. She was that slim mama that didn't do any work but always looked fresh. She spent all her time getting attention from boys in the neighborhood. Batif, on the other hand, was always looking like a laborer. Her skin was rough from the sun. and her clothes were always faded and undersized. Half the time, the new neighbors thought she was the house help from the village that Mama Oni was just trying to help. Imagine their shock when they found out that Oni was actually the stepdaughter and Baba Batif was Batif's biological father. Batif was now working like an ant, literally. She sometimes wished she could split herself into two and accomplish everything at once, but that was impossible. The work was crippling and she barely ever had time to herself. But one thing Mama Oni didn't know was that she was actually doing Batif a favor. By making her work so hard, she was training her for a future that required strong head and discipline. But at that time, it just felt like pure suffering. When Onyi turned 17, she got an invitation to go to Lagos with her cousin. The whole street heard the news. Onyi was going to the big city. When she left, things got even worse for Batif. Now, there was nobody else to even help a little with the chores, so Mama Onyi put the weight of 10 people on Batif's head. The woman would mock her every single day. She would say, "Look at your sister. She's in Lagos living a big life. I always knew she had a brighter future than you. You? You would just be here in this village till you grow old. You better find one boy to marry you now before you become expired goods." Batife would just keep quiet and wash the plates. The news of Oni's admission shook the small neighborhood. She was the prettiest girl on the street and the desire of many eligible men, even at her young age. The idea of her also being a university student was even more appealing. It wasn't long before suitors started lining up, ready to gain Mama Oni's favor with hope of swaying Oni to their side. But Mama Oni was an ambitious woman. She didn't think any man in the small town was worthy of her precious daughter. She had her eyes set on the bigger fishes, the senators and wealthy businessmen that surely lived in the city of Lagos would be more deserving of her Onyi, she thought. And she didn't fail to constantly remind Batif that Onyi was 1,000 steps ahead and would always be her superior. What Mama Onyi didn't know was that Batif was secretly studying for JAM. She wanted to go to school so badly, but every time she wanted to buy the form, she didn't have the money. She tried to talk to her father one of the few times he was home. "Daddy, I want to write JAM," she whispered. Ah, but Baba Batifi just shook his head. "My daughter, we don't have that kind of money. We have to focus on sending your younger sister to school first. She is the one that has the brain for Lagos life." Ah, Batife was heartbroken. How did they decide that she wasn't made her universe despite her good grades in WAEC and all her promotional examination? Didn't they see how passionate she was about education? Well, Baba Batif didn't seem to care. Either he was too occupied with his own tiresome job, or he didn't care about the welfare of his own daughter anyway. None of that mattered though, because when Mama Oni heard about it, she blew up. Batif had thought she was confiding in her father about her dreams. But little did she know that her father and daughter moment had actually involved a third party. Ah. Mama Oni didn't take it lightly. "You are jealous of my daughter. You want to go to school so you can compete with her? Stay in your place." After that, the workload tripled. Whatever work she'd been doing just got worse. When she wasn't going laundry, then she was fetching firewood or going to the market to get something that was already home. Mama Oni was clearly punishing her for her plans to go to school. That was becoming obvious. Batif almost gave up. She was out of secondary school for 4 years, just working like a slave. She had no hopes of furthering her education, learning a trade, or even starting a business of her own. Life looked quite bleak for Batif, and what little faith she had in the future was almost completely gone. But God works in mysterious ways. There was an old principal in their neighborhood as a very kind man. He often scolded the little boys about being miscreants and he was famous for his big grammar. Oga Soliloquy was his nickname, and all students made jest of him. One day, he saw Batife carrying a heavy load of firewood and stopped her. Batife, why are you not in school? It's been 4 years since you finished secondary school, he said. When she told him she didn't have money for the form, the man reached into his pocket. To her shock, he paid for her JAM registration and even gave her some books to read. Batife studied like her life depended on it, because it actually did. When the results came out, she scored really high and met the cutoff point. Batife's joy knew no bounds. She was finally going to stand a chance at going to university. She was not going to learn some trade that she didn't like. Well, the next step was getting into a school, and Batif often heard this was the tough part. She had no links or connections or money that she often had helped make the admission process easy. But she was hopeful and she applied to UNILAG as her first choice. You can only imagine the joy Batif felt when she got admission into UNILAG. She didn't tell her stepmother and certainly didn't tell her father. She just picked up her phone and called Onyi in Lagos. Onyi, I'm coming to Lagos for a few weeks to stay with you, she said. Onyi was a little skeptical, but she finally agreed because she wanted to show off. She wanted Batife to see how big she had become. Batif entered a night bus with the last bit of money she had saved up for the past 3 years. She didn't know how she'd feed or clothe herself, but she had prayed so long for the admission, and there was no way she was giving it up. So, with a worn out sack and faded undersized clothes, Batif arrived the big city of Lagos with big dreams and an empty stomach. It was only after she reached Onyi's house that she called her stepmother to tell her she had left home for good. Left home? This wasn't something any wicked stepmother wanted to hear. It sounded like a free slave had been liberated, and the sound of it wasn't very pleasant. Mama Onyi was screaming on the phone, telling her to come back immediately. But when their father heard, he actually defended her. To him, it was a thing of pride that a mere driver would be the father of two proud graduates. Ah, that was definitely something to brag about when he sat with his peers, drinking ogogoro and eating bole. It's good news, he said. Both my daughters will be university students. But Batif, you are on your own. I'm sending all my money to Onyi for her school. After all, she got there first. Batif wasn't shocked at her father's response. Honestly, she didn't even expect any support from her father. However, she did think he'd scold her and even demand her return home. So imagine her surprise when he didn't do that. But about not getting any support, Batife couldn't care less. She was in Lagos and she was a hardworking girl. She'd definitely find a way. Just the day after her arrival, Batif started selling zobo and puff puff on the streets to make money. In the morning, she would hawk, and in the afternoon, she would run to freshers' orientation class. It was hard, especially when the task force people started chasing street hawkers. One day, she almost lost all her goods, but that wasn't the most shocking thing to Batif. No. Her greatest shock in the big city came when she found out that her stepsister, Onyi, wasn't even a student. All the times Batife went to school, Onyi was either sleeping or going out with pretty and short little dresses. Batife got curious and asked when her lecturers were, and she never got any reply. Just as the truth cannot be hidden for so long, Batif soon found out that Onyi wasn't a student of the University of Lagos. All the talk about studying engineering was a big lie. Onyi was into hookup. She was dating different men for money. All the fine clothes, the expensive hair, and the big apartment came from questionable sources. Knowing that Batif was in on her lies, she angrily tried to throw her out of her apartment, but Batif was smart enough to strike a bargain. All she had to do was remind Onyi that her father would be very displeased to hear that all the money he'd been sending to her in Lagos was spent on his 16-inch bone, straight and pixie curls. Onyi was terrified that Batife would tell their parents. Please don't tell them, Onyi begged. Batife made a deal with her. I won't tell, but I'm staying in this apartment for free until I finish my degree. And so, Batife started her life as a real UNILAG student. She studied until her eyes were red. She was always the first in class and the last to leave. Soon, she became the top of her class. Everyone admired her because she spoke so well. Didn't I tell you? About that Ibadan discipline had actually turned her into a star. They even made her the assistant class rep in her department. Meanwhile, Onyi would see Batif coming home in her one faded skirt and white shirt and laugh. You look like you're singing in a village choir. See your hair. It's like a bird's nest. Who will look at you like this? But something strange was happening. Even without the makeup and the 30-inch wigs, men were gravitating toward Batif. Even some of the boys in the estate who used to chase Oni were now trying to talk to Batif. They liked her brain and they liked how she carried herself. Was it her dusty face, her straight legs, or just the fact that she was a UNILAG student? Oni couldn't explain it. But one thing was certain. She wasn't going to allow her classless stepsister outshine her. Then she became so desperate to keep up that she decided she also had to write jam for real this time. She wanted that student title so she could be more marketable and get access to big men. Around this time, as if the story of her academic journey wasn't miraculous enough, Batif got another huge opportunity, a scholarship to study abroad. She was so happy and began to make small plans. But when she told Onyi, Onyi's heart turned black with jealousy. Abroad? To do what? Onyi hissed. You are too poor to survive there. You don't have anyone to help you. If you go, you will just suffer. Stay here and finish at UNILAG. Nigeria is better for you. Because Batif didn't have any support system or anyone to encourage her. She listened to her sister and stayed back. She even spent her time helping Oni study for her own exams. Eventually, with Batife's help, Oni also got into Unilag. Now, both of them were on campus. Oni was cheating her way through every exam, but she didn't care. She was a university big girl now. Batif, meanwhile, was getting into school politics and joining the Christian Fellowship. She became a spokesperson, talking about important things like waste management and student welfare. She was sharp, she was bold, and she was smart. One day, there was a huge inaugural lecture at the main auditorium. All the big men in education were there. Batif had to give a presentation in front of everyone. She stood there in her simple clothes and spoke with so much power and intelligence that the whole hall went quiet. That was the moment she caught the eye of a very esteemed professor, a man of high timber and caliber. He sat there looking at this young girl from Ibadan, and he knew right then that he had found something special. He wasn't looking at her cheap clothes or her hair. He was looking at a girl who was about to change her world. And that, my people, was where the real story began. So after the long speech, the professor sat there in his Range Rover, looking at Batif like she was a rare diamond he just found in a heap of sand. And immediately after that lecture was dismissed, the man didn't even waste time. He straight up asked to drop her off. Now, Batife was skeptical. She's an Ibadan girl. She knows that when a big man offers a free ride, there's usually a hidden bill at the end. But her friends in campus politics were whispering in her ear, Omo, follow him. This is our chance to get visibility at the national level. And this man is a top tier member of the academic board. If he likes our presentation, we are made. So, Batif agreed. Inside that car, the smell of leather and expensive perfume and car diffusers was almost choking her. The professor told her plainly, I like how you think. I want us to collaborate on some research papers. He dropped her off, collected her number, and that was the beginning of a very strange week. The man was everywhere, calling, texting, picking her up after class. He started buying her things, new books, expensive bags, and even giving her pocket money that was more than her father's monthly salary. He would drop her home late at night with heavy packs of dinner from places only saw on Instagram. And that was when the real envy started at home. Onyi was watching from the window, her eyes turning green. Though she had been doing hookup for years, dating all sorts of Lagos big boys, but she had never bagged a man with a Range Rover that had that kind of new money smell. One night, as Batif walked in with a pack of some kind of five-star gourmet pasta, Oni couldn't hold it again. Who is that man always dropping you off in that big motor? Oni asked, her voice filled with barely subdued anger. Batif just shrugged. He's just a lecturer from school. We are working on a textbook together, Onyi hissed. Textbook, my foot. A man in a Range Rover does not discuss textbook at 9 p.m. Batife, don't be a dullard. Use what you have to get what you want. But the truth was, despite how naive she really wanted to be, Batife was feeling very uncomfortable. The gifts, a late night studying and constant phone calls were begging rather bothersome. What could a classy man like him want with a local girl like her? And to top it off, the man was married and he was way older, and his hands were starting to mistakenly touch hers during their study sessions. So, like it or not, Batif had to face the truth. She knew she couldn't lie to herself too long. Professor Ayomide wanted something more than collaboration on a textbook, and that she wasn't willing to give. So when she told Onyi she wanted to stop seeing him because she was a virgin and couldn't sleep with a married man, Onyi almost fainted. Are you mental? Onyi shouted. You're a virgin at your age and you want to waste this golden opportunity because of morals? If you don't want him, I'll move aside. Batife thought Onyi was just being her dramatic self. However, that was when Onyi did the unthinkable. She went into Batife's phone while she was bathing and stole the professor's number. And that wasn't all. Oh, she immediately started following him up behind her sister's back. In fact, Oni actually sent him a text that ruined everything. My sister is just using you for money. She has a secret boyfriend in the hostel. That's why she won't let you touch her. But me? I'm different. I know how to appreciate a real man. The professor felt betrayed, and as men usually are with their ego, he cut Batif off completely. No more rides, no more money, no more collaboration. He was done dropping her off and buying her dinner. In fact, Batife noticed that the man blocked her. Just like that. Oh, he didn't even have to wait to hear her side of the story. Anyways, Batif clearly hadn't known what her stepsister did, and she just decided Professor Ayomide was done playing cool with her. However, it wasn't long before the professor started coming around again, but this time it wasn't for Batif. He turned all his attention to Onyi, and Onyi was glowing, flaunting the man's wealth in Batif's face. A flight to Ghana today, a spa date tomorrow, and club night every Friday. It wasn't hard to see that Onyi had bettered herself in just a few weeks. Meanwhile, life became hard for Batif. Without that support she usually got from the professor, things became even tougher. Baba Batif still hadn't changed his mind about paying some of her bills. He insisted that Onyi needed all the help she could get, after all. Like she was the one studying engineering and the supposed star of the house. Soon, Batife couldn't pay her school dues. She begged Onyi for a small loan, but Onyi just laughed. Go and ask your morals to pay your fees. Batif had no choice. She packed her bags and paid for a night bus, ready to head back to Ibadan in shame. But like they say, when one window closes, God opens a door. While she was in school, she had stayed in touch with a kind woman from her campus fellowship. This woman, Mumi Abiodun, was a pillar in the church. When she heard Batif's story, the part about her being forced out of school and about to return home, she told her, "Come back to Lagos. I will pay your fees until you graduate. A brain like yours must not waste in the village." Batif came back, stayed with the woman, and focused on her final year. That was when Mommy Abiodun introduced her to her son Abiodun. Abiodun was everything a girl could want. He was smart, respectful, and God fearing. They hit it off immediately. Let me tell you this, real love won't stress you. Because what Batif and Abiodun shared wasn't about hookup or packaging. It was genuine and pure love. By the time final exams were over, Abiodun went down on one knee. He proposed to Batif. When Onyi heard the news, she almost choked on her fake champagne. She was still a runs girl, still cheating to pass her exams, while the sister she tried to finish was about to marry into a wealthy, respectable family. The jealousy she'd grown up with all her life started to burn her skin. She decided to ruin it. First, she tried to seduce Abiodun. She dressed in her tightest clothes and accidentally ran into him. But Abiodun didn't even look at her twice. All attempts ended up with him trying to make her born again and join the fellowship. Plan A failed, so she went to Plan B, which was her favorite: character assassination. On the night of the engagement after party, held at Abiodun's family house, Oni arrived like a cheap detective. She didn't come to celebrate, no, she came to scatter everything. She stood in the middle of the living room in front of Abiodun and his mother. "You people are marrying a snake," Oni shouted, pulling out her phone. "This Batif you are celebrating was a sugar baby in school. She was sleeping with a big professor for money. See the pictures of them in his car. See the gifts he bought her." She showed the photos, the ones she had taken secretly months ago. The room went silent. Mommy Abiodun took the phone, her hand shaking. But as she looked at the photos of the man in the car, her face didn't turn to anger toward Batif. It turned to pure horror. Because the sugar daddy in the pictures, the man in the Range Rover, was her own husband. Abiodun's father, Professor Ayomide. Everything first blur. What just happened right now? Did I just hear sugar daddy? Mommy Abiodun called her husband immediately. When the professor walked in, seeing Onye and Batife in his own living room, he almost turned into a pillar of salt. Oni thought she had won. She was smiling, waiting for them to kick Batife out. But the professor, seeing his wife's tears and his son's rage, finally broke. He looked at Onyi with pure disgust. "You ruined my home," he whispered to Onyi. Then he turned to his son and wife. "Everything she said about Batife is a lie. I tried everything to get Batif. I gave her money, I offered her the world, but she never touched a kobo of my money that wasn't for work. She refused me every single time because of her dignity. It was this one," he pointed at Onyi, "who chased me, lied to me, and moved into my guest house." The professor cut Onyi off right there. "Don't ever call my phone again. You are a home wrecker." The table turned so fast, Onyi's head was spinning. Onyi was kicked out of the house into the cold Lagos night. Without the professor's money, she couldn't keep up with her big girl lifestyle. She eventually dropped out of school because she couldn't pass her exams without sorting lecturers. She went back to the streets, hustling for Instagram likes and cheap hookups. But Batif got her degree with first class honors. And she married Abiodun in a wedding that was the talk of the town. Her stepmother back in Ibadan couldn't even show her face because the stone she rejected had truly become the cornerstone. Baba Batif was just there to brag. He didn't really care which of his daughters made it big. All he wanted was to be a proud father and reap where it didn't sow. My people, the jealousy that looks like a joke today will definitely develop wings tomorrow and likely fly too far than you can reach. In the end, Onyi was left with her fake hair and her bitter heart, while Batif walked away with the man of her dreams and a future that was actually bright.